The story of Kaiserreich is fundamentally a story of a people and an emperor. In the early days, the so-called primordial Kaiserreichers traveled between various regions, fleeing persecution and war. Back in those days, civil society was still largely underdeveloped in the old lands of the Empire. While the wars of this period left the area in a state of ruin, it was also the crucible for the Empire of Kaiserreich as it is today. For the purpose of historical record and education, His Imperial Majesty shall be referred to by his name without titles. In regular speech, it is customary in Kaiserreich to only refer to His Imperial Majesty by his titles. For a list of acceptable honorifics, please consult the Imperial Codex or relevant documentation. In time unrecorded, 5 lords came together to form a union of their lands. Scansinia and Ordovand were among these lords. Ordovand himself was the chief lord of the new country, referred to as the Union of the 8th Hour. The union came from humble beginnings, and soon Scansinia was elected chancellor. He believed that society should be based on civility and order, and began extensive reforms to achieve his goals. This is labeled as a golden age for the region, and is simultaneously its peak. Soon after, then-Chancellor Scansinia proposed a formal constitution. Infighting began in the region. This civil unrest was largely between the anarchists and the reformers. This divide is a recurring theme in Kaiserreich history. The forces of order against the legions of chaos take many different faces, but are nonetheless constantly at odds throughout history. Typically, the balance between the two is a hallmark of good times, but ultimately this struggle can be traced back to this first conflict. In what is referred to as the Darkest Day, Lord Ordovand, who held the ultimate executive authority, conducted a mass exile against the Union. This was the breaking point in the conflict, and open civil war ensued soon after. The Union civil war dragged on until Scansinia and his followers founded Mativa and reconquered the Union. Mativa was governed by one of the lords opposed to Ordovand, but true power was vested in the lord known as the Confederate People of the World, nicknamed the Pope. From what we know about the region, the power structure in Mativa was very weak. When the then-Chancellor suggested formal relations with the region known as the Black Riders, Scansinia was called upon to replace him as Chancellor. Much like the Union before it, Mativa fell to civil unrest as Chancellor Scansinia attempted to introduce a formal constitution. As the conflict continued, Region Corp stepped in to support the Scansonites. As the civil conflict developed and the region fell further into disarray, Region Corp shut off relations with Mativa but gifted the Scansonites Mativa V2 as a new settlement under the protection of Region Corp. The second Mativa suffered from an early case of inactivity, and the Scansonites migrated to Region Corp proper. Scansinia then founded the Federal Conservative Party, which was a leading force in Region Corp as he himself was elected Chancellor once again. During this time, the earliest iteration of the Reichswehr was formed soon after as a military organization. As the age of prosperity waned and the region slowed, Chancellor Scansinia decided that it was time to close Region Corp. Scansinia had called his followers to the new lands of the Union of Confederate Regions, a legendary region that spanned many ages both before and after the fall of Region Corp. Very soon, the Scansonites joined the UCR en masse, and immediately got to work assisting with reforms to remake the UCR around Scansonite values. The UCR's old guard suspected the Scansonites of trying to overwhelm the government, and after a traitor divulged the Scansonites' plans for reforming the region, known as the Peaceful Coup, the UCR exiled them and began a period of persecution. The war continued around Fort Whitehorse, a remnant of an older empire that had joined the Reichswehr before the collapse of Region Corp. The Scansonites defended themselves against legions of UCR soldiers. As the First Scanson Confederate War began to slow, Murder Corp founded the Interregional Trade Federation, a spiritual continuation of Region Corp. The IRTF prospered in the wake of the war. All was well until an insurmountable economic collapse caused yet another exodus. Scansinia's long-hailed corporation, the Reichswehr, began to grow exponentially in this time. Many degenerate regions fell to the forces of the Reichswehr, and as it gained power, the tide of the war gradually turned against the UCR. Initially, while the Reichswehr had had the upper hand, the war dragged on into a stalemate. The war soon ended with a Scansenite victory, dividing the lands of the UCR. Scansinia's forces continued to earn various victories in the coming age, but soon inactivity struck once again during the Great Silence, in which many territories were lost. A rallying cry to be heard across Scansenite territory soon rang out as Chancellor Scansinia began campaigns to retake the lost land. This culminated in the grand battle, pitting various regions against one another. In a heroic show of strength, the forces of united Scansenites overcame the Socialist bloc. In this time, Feudalism was inspired to them and formally structured from the old Union, Scansenite, and White Horse traditions. Its ancient traditions would go on to live into the modern day. Feudalism grew and was also adopted in broader Scansenite and Reich lands. Notably, Feudalism and the UCR Feudal Temple was banned outright in the old UCR, as they saw it as Scansinia's influence creeping in once more. After an attack on Fort Whitehorse, a second Scansen Confederate War concluded with another Scansenite victory. The victory of the UCR led the Scansenites to formally found the Empire of Kaiserreich, with Kaiser Scansinia assuming his destined role after a formal vote of all leaders, chiefs, and even peasants. The early empire was a time of war and uncertainty. Minor disputes often erupted into full-blown conflict, and major schisms began to take place not long after the founding. The empire's enemies were many in that age. Among these were the Oakwood, the Femdom Empire, the allied forces of Cain, and even from within, as Canton led a democratic uprising. The major theme of the early empire was the eternal people's struggle for survival in an increasingly hostile world. Toward the end of the age, Eskvo, the leader of the then current form of the Reichswehr, began a massive civil war against the empire in what is known today as the Aegyr-Germanian Separatist War. The toll fell across the empire as families and friendships were torn apart in the wake of one of the deadliest wars in Kaiserreich history continued to deepen. In the end, Aegyr-Germania was able to separate from Kaiserreich, but ended up failing and giving in to inactivity. Many Aegean veterans of the war soon returned to Kaiserreich as Aegyr-Germania continued to collapse. The empire underwent an extreme renewal in the following year. Culture and civilization continued to develop into the rich society that we have today. Major wars died down, and the empire was met with relative external peace. Toward the turn of the age, though, conflict began brewing as the Kaiser was incapacitated for a long period of time. Major imperial protectorates began seceding at unprecedented rates, and inactivity began to creep its way into the region. One major war occurred in this age that would prove to be the greatest challenge to the empire to that point, even surpassing the Aegyr-Germanian Separatist War. The region known as the Wolf Clan declared war on the empire as the Kaiserreicher known as apostate defected and convinced large swaths of enemies to unite in an unholy war against the empire. Eventually, the consulate was formed to counteract the issues of the day, but as time went on, it became weak. This was the perfect opportunity for what is known as the Junta to take over, with Argentina assuming control of the region for a short time. After the Junta fell due to general incompetence, the first great Imperium, known as the Kaiserbund, was formed. This was because an associate state known as Monte Alban wanted to join the empire. The Monte Albans were less orderly than the Kaiserreichers, and there were minor conflicts between the groups, but the Kaiserbund enjoyed some relative prosperity in its time. The Kaiserreich-Wolf-Clan War continued to worsen, with many Kaiserreich territories following to the enemy. Finally, after many ages of war and strife, the Empire and the Wolf Clan came to peace. This was also a time of religious freedom, as Feudalism was continuously challenged as the chief religion of the Empire. Monte Alban took a much larger role in the empire over time, and eventually a new union was formed between Kaiserreich and Monte Alban. In time, cracks began to show in the relationship between the Kaiserreichers and the Monte Albans, as new political parties began to appear in firm opposition to the Monte Alban sects. Tensions gradually increased until a secretive group of high-ranking, pro-nativist Kaiserreichers launched an empire-wide purge on the Monte Albans. The secret police of the time, the GRSD, began rounding up and exiling groups of Monte Albans en masse. At the same time, the regional hub of communication and art in the empire was ransacked and destroyed by pro-Monte Alban forces in the upper echelons of the imperial government. A major schism in civil war followed until all that was left were the conspirators. Socialism then began to take hold in Kaiserreich, as the Monte Albans were the largest anti-socialist bloc at the time. The socialist groups aimed to fundamentally change the empire, but the other conspirators of the Great Monte Alban Purge were not so keen to let that happen. At the same time, a group of undercover Monte Albans snuck into the empire and assumed positions of power long enough to ban socialism and its derivatives alongside the former conspirators that had exiled them. When the Monte Alban operatives left, a major chasm in the imperial government formed. The police state, run by the GRSD, soon collapsed with the return of the Monte Albans and their sympathizers to Kaiserreich. After a long time, the empire was in a state of peace. Economic prosperity returned as the Reichsbank established a new economic norm for Kaiserreich. Culture continued to flourish in the New Age as more advanced cultural projects impressed the world over with their intricacy and beauty. All those generations ago, the ancestors of Kaiserreich laid the foundation for a grand empire, and today, despite its troubled and storied history, it has realized its true greatness.